If adventure has a name, it must be Indiana Jones. Created by George Lucas and brought to life by the charismatic portrayal of Harrison Ford, the archaeologist adventurer has captivated audiences since his first appearance in Raiders of the Lost Ark in 1981. For over 40 years and across 5 movies, the character has become a cultural phenomenon. Raiders of the Lost Ark introduced audiences to the swashbuckling hero, showcasing his wit, charm, and bravery as he battled Nazis in search of the biblical Ark of the Covenant. The film's success led to 4 sequels: Temple of Doom, The Last Crusade, Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, and finally, The Dial of Destiny, which brought the series to a definitive end in 2023. Indiana Jones not only conquered the silver screen, but also became a pop culture icon. His signature fedora, leather jacket, and bullwhip have become instantly recognizable symbols of adventure and heroism. The character's popularity has extended beyond the movies, inspiring merchandise, video games, and even theme park attractions. Indiana Jones has become a symbol of adventure and exploration, embodying the spirit of discovery and daring. Hey everyone, the Indiana Jones series means so much to me. Being a child of the 80s, I literally grew up watching these movies, and I absolutely love this character. Indy may in fact be my favourite movie character of all time, along with the likes of James Bond and Batman. He's just that iconic. And although multiple actors have played the likes of 007 and The Dark Knight, it's almost impossible to imagine anyone besides Harrison Ford playing Indy. I can't think of anyone playing an action hero for as long as Ford did. When you think about it, it's just astonishing that he's been identified as playing this character for over 40 years. Robert Downey Jr. played Iron Man about 9 times, but that was over a relatively short period of 10 years, in comparison to how long Ford has been playing Indy. Regardless of the quality of some of the movies, the idea of anyone playing an action hero into their 80s is such an amazing accomplishment. I'll be glad if I'm still able to walk under my own power when I'm 80. But anyway, now that the series has reached a definitive end with Dial of Destiny, I thought now would be a good time to do a ranking video of the whole series. I wanted to wait a while until after Destiny came out, because I wanted to see that movie a couple of times, and allow it time to settle into the series before I ranked it in with the others. Now, before I get started, just to say that I'm ranking these according to the level of pure enjoyment for me personally. I'm sure there are plenty of people who will disagree with my choices, and that's fine. Please feel free to post your own lists in the comments down below. And with that out of the way, let's get started. Number 5. Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. Hard as it is to imagine now, everyone walking out of seeing The Last Crusade in 1989 thought they'd seen the last of Indy. There was just something so satisfying of seeing him literally ride off into the sunset with his dad and friends at the end of that film, bringing an end to a fantastic trilogy of movies that defined a decade. And you know what? I was happy with that. I've always believed in the idea of quitting while you're ahead. Certainly, it was the intention of series creators George Lucas, Steven Spielberg, and star Harrison Ford that The Last Crusade be exactly that. There would be no further big screen adventures for Indy, as everyone involved would move on to new things. Over the years, however, there just seemed to be a demand for a 4th adventure for Dr. Jones. Spielberg himself has often said that no matter what film he was promoting, he would always be asked when the next Indy would be out, and development began in the mid-1990s. But it wouldn't be until 2008 until the actual return of Indiana Jones to movie screens would occur. And after all that time, this is what we got? Now, Kingdom of the Crystal Skull is by no means an absolute disaster of a movie, but it is extremely disappointing, considering how much time it took to get it made, and the talent of those involved in making it. With a near 20-year gap between films, the film was set in the late 50s to accommodate Harrison Ford's age, and the plot where he fights a gang of Russians led by the extremely camp villain Irina Spalko to find the titular Kingdom of the Crystal Skull is just weird, nonsensical, and doesn't feel like an appropriate storyline for an Indiana Jones film. Since the movie began development in the 90s, the likes of the X-Files was all the rage, and alien conspiracies were everywhere. The shift from the religious and spiritual artifacts of the classic trilogy to the pulp sci-fi of the likes of Aliens is a bit extreme. Oh, I'm sorry, they were not aliens, they were interdimensional beings. Now, I've never had too much of a problem with this per se. Since the movie takes place in the 50s, it makes sense that the Russians would replace the likes of the Nazis as the villains. Pulp sci-fi like Invaders from Mars and Forbidden Planet were all the rage during that era. My problem is really with the script and the execution. It's just not very good. A lot of the film's humour is just goofy and seems like it belongs more in a Scooby-Doo cartoon. The film's tone is pretty much set right at the beginning. CGI gophers popping up, and there are several instances of other creatures popping up in the movie, which seems like it belongs more in Star Wars than Indy. A lot of the CGI in the film is shockingly bad. I know there are a few not great VFX shots in the classic trilogy, but there are so many bad shots of CGI in Crystal Skull, and I don't know how Lucas and Spielberg managed to let it go through, particularly during the jungle chase. The film's colour grading doesn't help. The film is just so bright and oversaturated that it makes these shots look even worse on Blu-ray. I have heard, however, that later 4K releases have dialed the oversaturated colours down. While the infamous scene of Indy surviving a nuclear explosion is ridiculous, it's nowhere near as silly as the scene where Mutt swings through the jungle with lots of CGI monkeys. Just what were they thinking here? It's almost, not quite as bad as James Bond ice surfing in Die Another Day. Speaking of Mutt, I know a lot of fans hate this character. I actually didn't mind him at all, and think Shia LaBeouf gave a decent performance. He's clearly channeling a lot of James Dean here, but I honestly think he was just miscast in this role. LaBeouf was casting everything during the late noughties, before he went off the rails.
Do it! Just do it!
Karen Allen returns for the first time since Raiders in this film. While she still has great chemistry with Harrison Ford, she wildly overacts and comes across like a crazy woman who can't stop laughing and smiling at every situation she's in. It's weird because in her other appearances in the series, she's pretty good. I blame the script and direction really. The less said about Ray Winstone as Mac, the better. I've always thought he was an overrated actor, to be honest. The character is just annoying, and not in a good way. Like I said earlier, the film is not a total train wreck. The first half of the film is actually quite decent, and seems to be from a better film, with some good practical stunt work during the bike chase. And despite being absent from the role for nearly 20 years, Ford just picks up right where he left off and gives a terrific performance, proving that despite being in his mid-60s at this point, he was still a terrific action hero. I especially like the big fight he has with the big Russian while they're surrounded by killer ants. It was good old-fashioned Indy one-on-one with a giant opponent. Overall, however, Kingdom of the Crystal Skull is easily for me the worst film in the series. Number 4. Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny. The newest entry on this list, Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny seems to be the pretty definitive end to the series. The first movie in the franchise not to have any involvement from series creators George Lucas and Steven Spielberg. This project was instead shepherded to the screen by the infamous franchise killer Kathleen Kennedy. For the longest time, I never actually believed this movie would get made. The film was officially announced in 2016, when Harrison Ford was in his mid-70s, but production would not begin until 2021. Again, the idea of a big-budget adventure film starring an actor who was nearly 80 is unheard of. Regardless of the film's quality, it's a testament to Ford that he was still able to do this. I have to say, I went into this film with extremely low expectations. Ever since Disney acquired the rights to Lucasfilm, and Kathleen Kennedy was put in charge of the company, she's just proven herself to be one of the most incompetent producers in Hollywood history. She's almost single-handedly responsible for destroying the reputation of the Star Wars franchise, and I feared she was going to do the same to Indy. Also, the fact that Phoebe Waller-Bridge was going to have a major role in the film set off alarm bells for many fans. Waller-Bridge is mostly known for writing the ultra-feminist shows Fleabag and Killing Eve, playing the part of that fucking annoying robot in Solo: A Star Wars Story. I have to say though that, despite that, I think Dial of Destiny turned out to be a half-decent film. The movie doesn't try to ignore Indy's old age, it actually makes it an important part of the story. And despite Ford's age, there's still some pretty exciting action sequences, like the ticker tape parade sequence and the tuk-tuk chase in Tangier. Also, I think James Mangold does a much better directing job here than Spielberg did in Crystal Skull. CGI is pretty decent for the most part, and the de-aging of Indy for the opening sequence is actually very well done. While it still has that uncanny valley element to it, that technology is getting better all the time. Just compare how well it looks compared to that awful deepfake shot of Leia in Rogue One. They're miles apart in terms of quality. As for Phoebe Waller-Bridge as Helen, I actually think she puts in a pretty decent performance. The script threatens to make her very unlikable early on though. I really hated her for leaving Indy behind in the museum sequence, where the villains attack and kill several people. While the character does come across as selfish, she actually has a pretty interesting arc throughout the movie, and by the end, she comes to care about Indy a lot. The crucial moment of the film where she punches Indy in the face at the climax, I understand is very divisive for people, and I get that. I think they could have come up with a better ending, quite frankly. But I'm actually surprised that, considering Kennedy and Disney's involvement in this film, that's almost entirely woke-free. Indy is pretty much the main character throughout, and while he does get a few undignified moments in the film, he does get a lot of great scenes. For me, where the film really fails is in terms of the villain's plot to go back in time and win World War II for the Nazis. Given how the film ends, this was never actually going to work, whether Indy was there or not. Kind of a similar problem with Raiders of the Lost Ark's ending, actually. Overall, while Dial of Destiny is a movie that didn't need to exist, I don't think it's the disaster that people make it out to be, and at least it gives Indy a happy ending. Unlike Han Solo. Nope, still not over it. Number 3, Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom. Moving into the classic trilogy now, Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom was, similar to the original Star Wars trilogy entry, Empire Strikes Back, the darkest film in the series. This movie, actually a prequel to Raiders of the Lost Ark, is unlike any in the series, in that it doesn't globetrot, and pretty much stays put in India. The film's plot couldn't be more different from its predecessor, with Indy not so much setting out on a mission to find an ancient artifact, but more or less falling into it by accident, along with his young orphan sidekick Short Round, and loudmouth nightclub singer Willie Scott, a character who not only has a great talent for singing, but screaming. Lots of screaming.
Trouble with her is the noise.
Temple of Doom was notorious back in the day for the perceived overuse of violence and gore in the series. While it does get pretty rough, with hearts literally being ripped out of chests and people being burned alive, I've always thought that the film's use of comedy really balanced out all the darkness and horror in it. This was the first Indiana Jones movie I ever saw, so I have a lot of nostalgic love for this one. I absolutely could not get enough of this as a kid. Indy to me was the coolest character ever. The way Short Round idolised Indy was something I myself, and I could imagine other kids at the time could relate to. I know a lot of people find Willie Scott annoying, but I've always thought she was hilarious. I would actually argue she's a better sidekick and romantic interest for Indy than Marion Ravenwood. For me, Temple of Doom has many of the best aspects of the series. I just love that it's so dark and violent, and Indy even turns evil in it. I actually wish they had played up this element of the plot more, as Harrison Ford really brings it in these scenes, and it makes me wish he played more villains in his career. Speaking of Ford, he was at his charismatic peak in this film. The guy just had movie star written all over him, and handles the comedy, the seriousness, and the action with seemingly effortless ease. I say seemingly, because Ford actually had a pretty serious injury during the making of this film, which put him out of commission for a number of months during production, resulting in stuntman Vic Armstrong doing some of the more dangerous looking stunts in the movie. But you can still clearly see Ford doing a lot of his own fighting here. Moll Ram is, as far as I'm concerned, the best villain of the series. Unlike most of the other Indy villains, he's an extremely dangerous physical threat, and the only one who seems to have some kind of supernatural powers to him. Interestingly, he's not introduced until about halfway through the film, but he's absolutely terrifying. Temple of Doom was actually responsible for the creation of the PG-13 rating, after complaints by parents that the PG rating was too soft for such a violent film. For the longest time, this film had some of the more violent scenes cut on various home media releases, and I was surprised when it finally came out to DVD that the film was finally uncut, and that all the violence and gore was restored, which is good because I hate censorship. For me, I don't have anything really negative to say about Temple of Doom. I love the whole original trilogy of Indy films, and ask me again in a year's time, this could easily top my list. If I can criticise anything, it's that the movie doesn't really globetrot like the other movies. And I understand fans of Raiders miss the presence of Salah and Marcus Brody. I don't think they need to be in every indie film though, and their characters weren't really required for this story. As far as the action is concerned, this is up there with the best of the series, with the roller coaster chase and bridge battle scenes still looking great 40 years later. Also, this movie has a much happier ending than Raiders. Swear to God, if you're not in a good mood, put the final scene of this movie on. It's impossible not to smile and feel all is good with the world. Number 2. Raiders of the Lost Ark. The original, and some would say the best of the Indiana Jones series. Raiders of the Lost Ark, and no, the movie is not called Indiana Jones and the Raiders of the Lost Ark. No such movie exists according to IMDb anyway. It's the movie that started the series off. The movie's plot pretty much set the tone and standard for the rest of the series. High adventure, terrific stunts, creepy crawlies, booby traps, and a healthy dose of humour. George Lucas was, of course, inspired by the classic serials of the 1930s in the creation of the series and character. Originally called Indiana Smith, by the way. Steven Spielberg had always wanted to direct a James Bond film, until Lucas told him that he had something better. You can see the Bond influence in Raiders, of course. The movie, like most 007 films, opens with the climax of an adventure in progress, and this tradition will continue for the rest of the series. Harrison Ford, from the very minute he appears, just owns this role, and has one of the most badass character introductions of all time. It's hard to imagine now, of course, that anyone else was cast in the role. Tom Selleck was the first choice for Indy, before having to drop out due to commitments to his TV series, Magnum P.I. There are a few YouTube videos you can find where Selleck is deep-faked into some of the movies, if you're curious. And Selleck kind of eventually managed to play Indy in an episode of Magnum P.I., which is well worth checking out. Nearly everything in Raiders works like gangbusters. The action is great, the locations are stunning, John Williams' score, particularly the Ark theme, Love theme, and of course the main Indiana Jones theme is unforgettable. The film's action highlight is, of course, the magnificent desert truck chase, where Indy single-handedly takes on an entire army of Nazi soldiers in an effort to steal the Ark off them. It's just a masterclass in terrific stunt work, editing, music, and sheer excitement. It's not just the best chase scene of the entire series, but the best in movie history as far as I'm concerned. And yet, as great as Raiders is, it doesn't quite take the top spot for me. There are just a few things that bother me about it. The film's climax is Indy being a little inconsequential to the entire plot, as God blasts the Nazis to Kingdom Come. This is something that's been explored a lot in pop culture, by the way. Just ask Sheldon Cooper's girlfriend.
Indiana Jones plays no role in the outcome of the story. If he weren't in the film, it would turn out exactly the same. And if he weren't in the movie, the Nazis would have still found the Ark, taken it to the island, opened it up, and all died. Just like they did.
Also, just how did Indy survive that submarine journey? It's just a really big plot hole. I also have to say that, although I like the Marion Ravenwood character, she's not my favourite Indy girl. Maybe my opinion of her has dropped due to her appearance in Crystal Skull. I don't know. Overall, however, Raiders of the Lost Ark is an all-time classic adventure film. Objectively speaking, it may be the best made film in the series, but my own personal favourite and my number one movie in this list is Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. Yes, the third movie in the series where Indy teams up with his dad, played by the legendary Sean Connery, is my favourite Indiana Jones adventure. Despite Temple of Doom's huge box office success, there was a lot of backlash to the film in terms of its tone and violence. Crusade seemed like a deliberate attempt to get back to basics, with a plot, style and structure which turned out to be very similar to Raiders. I remember Last Crusade getting some criticism for this at the time of release, but you know what? I just don't care. This movie is just an absolute blast from start to finish. While it lacks in originality, it more than makes up for in sheer entertainment value. It's also got Indiana Jones teaming up with the original and best James Bond. It doesn't get any cooler than that. As I said earlier, Bond was a big influence on the Indiana Jones series, and the casting of Sean Connery as Indy's dad is just so fitting in that sense. Connery brings all his charm and charisma to the character of Henry Jones, and he and Harrison Ford are just a terrific double act. It's interesting how Connery doesn't actually appear for the first 40 minutes or so of the film, and Indy is teamed up temporarily Alison Dooley's Elsa Schneider. More on her in a minute. So for the first act or so, the film is a standard Indiana Jones adventure. Once Indy is reunited with his dad, it turns into a buddy comedy of sorts. The film's romantic interest turns out to be a traitor, and the film becomes not so much about Indy trying to find the Holy Grail, but to reconcile with his father. Everything you could want from an Indiana Jones movie is here, from the gorgeous locations to the terrific action and stunts. What makes Last Crusade my personal favourite is the central relationship between Indy and his dad. It just never fails to make me laugh at all the crazy situations that they get into, but at the same time, there are some really heartfelt moments as well. There was actually only an 11-year difference between Connery and Ford, but they got away with the whole father-son thing on screen. Also, one of the funniest aspects about it is that both father and son ended up sleeping with the same woman. It's amazing that they got away with that at the time this film was released, actually. Can you imagine that happening in a family-friendly movie today? Speaking of the love interest, Alison Dooley was just absolutely gorgeous in this, and my favourite indie girl of the series. I know I'm in the minority on that one, but apart from her beauty, her character arc is actually quite interesting, in the fact that she goes from love interest to villain to almost becoming sympathetic by the end. Also, Alison Dooley is Irish. I have to say she's the best. She's not really a villain as such, despite the fact that she betrays Indy. She's more misguided than anything, and genuinely seemed to care about him by the end. Another reason I love this one is that almost all the main characters from Raiders are along for the ride and join in on this adventure. Both Sala and Marcus Brody have much expanded roles than they did in the first movie, and have some great scenes together. As far as the action in this one goes, I just love the variety, and it covers land, sea and air. We have a train chase, speedboat chase, motorbike chase, fighter plane dogfight, and of course, the terrific tank battle, which is almost as good as the Raiders' truck chase. On top of all that, unlike Raiders, Indy is very active and crucial to the spiritual climax of the story, where he has to overcome several booby traps to get to the Grail and save his dad. My absolute favourite scene of the whole series is where the cavern is collapsing. Indy is just hanging on, trying to reach the Grail, because he knows how much it means to his dad, but Henry tells him to let it go. In that moment, he proves how much he loves his son, and how much more important he is than his lifelong obsession with the Grail. It's a fantastic moment, and the way they all ride off into the sunset would have been a great way to end the series. That turned out not to be the case. But overall, yeah, The Last Crusade is my favourite Indiana Jones movie, and number one on my list. But hey, that's just my opinion. What about yours? Please post your own rankings in the comment section down below. I always enjoy reading comments, even the ones that disagree with me. Thanks for watching this video. If you enjoyed, then please give it a like. Consider subscribing if you haven't done so already. Share it with your friends. Click the bell for notifications. And I'll see you all next time. Bye for now.